So we're going to talk about building momentum in your deal and making sure that you're maintaining that momentum throughout the sales cycle. So, Harry, do you want to start us off? What's something that we can do before we even jump into a discovery call that will get us going and make sure that we're
Sure.
setting ourselves up for success there?
I think anyone that knows me knows I love outbound, and I look at it from this lens. The biggest advantage in outbound is that you pick who you go after. It's your targeting, and tight targeting at that. The questions you need to answer before you start any outbound play is who, business buyer, why, your hypothesis, and when. So the when needs to have some urgency built into it. Examples could be a renewal date for a competitor, an external initiative, a government initiative potentially. Those are two pretty good examples that you should include in your targeting hypothesis so that you're actually only reaching out to people who you believe has some sort of inbuilt urgency.
To make this real, if you're selling to accountants, every year they have a hectic year end. If you're selling to sales teams, end of quarter is always a busy time, end of financial year. So if you can find those things, you can build that into your targeting and begin building momentum and urgency even before you start reaching out to someone or as you reach out to people as well.
Leslie, you work in the event space as well. We're very lucky in the events world that there is inbuilt urgency, but if they're 3 months out and you have to execute on a bunch of deliverables, that's a targeting hypothesis.
Yeah.
I would also say when you're outbounding, you can set the pace almost from the get-go. When someone agrees to take a meeting with you on a cold call or replies to an email saying they're interested, most people default to that meeting in rather than they need to. If someone agrees to a meeting, there is nothing stopping you from saying something like, hey, would tomorrow be too soon?
Mm-hmm.
And immediately you've got a ton of momentum, a ton of velocity, and you're just naturally building in an urgent deal cycle. Wins happen a lot quicker than losses do. So if you can make things begin quickly, then they will likely continue that way as well. So try your luck when you're getting someone to agree to a meeting to try and book that meeting in sooner. Obviously, there's a bunch of extra benefits for that. For example, if you book a meeting out for 2 weeks in the future, it's much less likely to even happen. The no-show rate skyrockets the longer you wait. So there's advantages there, but it also is just going to help set that deal up for fast wins.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I didn't even really think about that. And it's actually a negative consequence of these booking meeting links. You could adjust the available slots to only show a couple days, and you're far more likely to get that meeting booked in 1 to 3 days after the agreement to the call.
Great point.
Yep.
So it's instead of sharing all of your calendar availability and showing 8 weeks in the future, you're saying, let me just share this like smaller window.
And there are settings in most calendar tools that allow you to do that as well. You can decide how far in advance. And if you have different links for different use cases, recommend doing that.
Now, the other thing I'm thinking about now is if you give someone a reason why, they're more likely to accept your offer. So maybe you explain why you've only got availability in the next 3 days. You have an event, you have whatever, and it could be hopefully true.
You said something so beautifully about coming with an opinion formed and like being able to offer the buckets. And I thought it was just a unique take on the bucket question.
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
Well, I stole that from Kevin Dorsey, so I can't take all the credit for it. A bucket question is a way to anchor the conversation around a business initiative that has impact. And it goes something like, most people we speak to are experiencing this context or current state, and this is the impact, or they're experiencing this pressure from their executive team to do this for this reason and this business impact. Do either of those resonate with you, or have I completely missed where you're coming from? What we want to try and avoid is separate the buyers who are just curious or maybe have a small technical pain to the buyers that actually have a business initiative and actually have relevant context in a current state that needs solving more urgently than others.
Love that. And I think just the whole conversation here, momentum, velocity, whatever you want to call it, all of that is only helped when you do really discovery and uncover a problem that's only going to make them want to change sooner. Mm-hmm. So the intro call is a lot of where the rest of your deal cycle will be set up just by asking the right questions, understanding is there a problem that they're really keen to solve, and if there is, the momentum should help for itself because you can use that to drive the rest of the timeline. Inbound leads, you can even ask people, hey, seems like you're looking into this. When were you hoping to have something in place? And then they're going to say, well, we were aiming for July. Oh, what's driving that timeline? What's making July significant? And ideally what you can uncover is something that's going to help anchor the deal timeline in their goals.
Yes.
Because we all want to close deals as soon as possible,
Of
right?
course.
But if they tell us we need it in July because of accounting year end, or we've got a big event in August that we're going to be all tied up for, you can then begin to work backwards and set the date to help them reach that goal and that timeline they've given you. Understanding the why behind that timeline will allow you to keep coming back to their why. And then for you're never just following up or just checking in, you're saying, hey, I know you were hoping to get this done because of this. And all of your steps can link back to their goals and their why.
Yeah, going back to the why. I know. Okay, give me an emoji, your favorite emoji in the chat if this rings true to you. But I think all of us have the best intentions of setting next steps on discovery calls and like making sure that we book that. It's like core foundational sales 101 is to always have that next
No
step.
next step, no deal.
So bad.
What's your next step? Your manager's going to come ask you, but you got to be ready. Talk to me if you have been in this position. Give me an emoji in the chat if you have the best intentions of setting next steps. And then it just like time flies and the person is like, I got to run. Sorry, bye. And hangs up the phone. And you're like, damn it. I did not get those next steps. Anyone else been there before?
It happens to me daily.
What do you do to make sure that you always capture those like clear next steps before your call ends?
Knowing that a deal with no next steps is so much more likely to go close, lost, go dark on you. Best case scenario, if you don't put the next steps, is you're going to have to chase them, play some email tennis to get the call on the calendar. Worst case, you never hear from them again, the deal's gone already, right? So in my mind, a lot of what we're going to talk about today and in the upcoming bit throughout the entire deal cycle is setting expectations. So at the very beginning of the call, use what, if you've done any SaaS training, would be called upfront contract. And in that agenda, when you set the agenda for the call, hey, is it good if we set 5 minutes towards the end? So just to make sure that we can agree on what next steps would be, if they even apply. It might be the case that you might find we're not a fit today. But if we are, what we can do is take the last 5 minutes of this call to decide where we go from here. Then what you're literally going to do is pull out your phone and set a timer, put it on silent for 25 minutes. Regardless of what is happening at that 25-minute mark, you're going to stop the call there and say, hey, love to keep chatting, but we did agree that we'd make sure we have 5 minutes at the end here to align our next steps to continue this conversation. And then it's where do we go from here, right? So no matter what, you've always got enough time. And in that, giving yourself 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes, if there's any pushback there, it gives you time to explore that. Because if someone is pushing back on me for next steps, that's normally a orange or potentially even a red flag that potentially they're just not interested, motivated to solve the issue that they've come to me with, or they're just too polite to tell me, hey, this just isn't going to be on our top 5 priorities for the next quarter. So I want to have time to dig into that if it is an objection, or if it isn't, I can then set expectations for what that next step's going to be, figure out who else might want to be involved in that and start multi-threading the deal in that 5 minutes as well.
Yeah, leaving yourself some time. Last thing on that list was actually listen. And I think this is something that we want to I want to just hear your thoughts on in terms of how we're engaging in our calls with our prospects, with our customers, with anybody.
I've made this mistake many, many times. And I've also been on the buyer side where I have a call with a rep and they talk at me for 24 minutes. And I'm basically working for 21 of those minutes, but nodding.
Yeah.
And then
on the screen doing something else.
I don't want to spend time with them afterwards. I think that's why a lot of deals stall or get slowed down, because there's just not that vibe or that factor in there.
But I think that starts a lot of times with listening and asking good questions, moving into the next piece. It's like after the conversation happens, after we do discovery. I feel like this is a place where a lot of us naturally think about building momentum. Like, how are we going to pull people in? How are we going to have them take those next steps? They have to make a decision now, right? They have the information. They have the map of what's in front of you. Now, how can we be compelling in our follow-up, and whether that's an email or your process, your next steps? Talk to me about recap email. What has to be involved? What are you doing to make sure you set yourself up for success there?
Yeah, so I had this recap email drilled into me from an early stage when I first started selling into tech. You obviously are going to recap everything you've heard and clarify. I like to try and do that in my own words as much as possible, but also mirror some of their language in there as well. So I'm going to list, context, problem, impact. Ideally, those are going to be my 3 bullet points. I'm going to say, hey, so-and-so, great chatting to you. Could you do me a favor? Take a look at this email, make sure it all looks correct. And then I'm going to go into, this is what I heard, the context, the problem, the impact. And then I'm going to say, and to clarify, this is what we agreed upon as next steps. And then I'm going to list out at minimum one next step, ideally, if I'm able to book that. If I'm not, then I'm already kind of skeptical about the deal. But there might be multiple things, a bit of homework for them, some more things you might be sharing, some more people you might be involving from your team and resources you need to make that happen. And then again, I'm going to officially email off. Once again, just let me know if this all looks okay. Drop a response. And I'm asking them for a response to the email as well, because I want them to respond, because again, that's an early indicator of me of level of engagement from the buyer. They respond to the email saying, yep, that's right. That's all accurate. Looking forward to the next call. I know immediately that I've got someone who's more engaged than someone who just sees the email and ignores it.
Yeah, it's a champion test. If you have someone at the right level, it's a champion test. If they've agreed to give you access to something, data or whatever, you can actually track that in your next step. I used to work with a great AE. His name was Brian Charlton. He's at Otter now. He's one of the most likable and organized AEs I've ever been a part of. He has very high conversion and buyers loved him. He would map out the buyer committee in advance. Obviously, we were already targeting them, so it's quite easy. He would find our links to these people. So it's like, oh, your CTO is an investor and blah, blah, or, they're part of Craft or whatever the hell. And he would raise it really early in the call and he'd say, hey, did you come to us because your CTO is friends with my CEO and maybe they recommend, and what he's doing there is one, mapping out the buyer committee and validating things, but two, getting ahead of the awkwardness of waiting for someone to introduce you to someone to power. And then maybe at the end of the call, they'll say, hey, I thought this went really well. Do you mind me just sending the recap to Bob, right? Or Sarah, because he's already opened up that avenue.
I also think it's definitely worth coming with those names. If you know that your deals don't go anywhere, if you don't involve persona A and persona B title A, come with those names. You know who they are generally. So ahead of the call when you're doing your research, not only are you going to come with a hypothesis, but you can say, hey, typically the folks who are going to want to be involved in this next call is this person because of this. I saw that might be Leslie at Sellbetter. And by sharing that name, you're only making it easier for them to involve people, which is a huge part of building momentum. The more people you've got involved in the deal, the more points of contact, the more problems you're talking about, and the more it becomes a team initiative that actually has a momentum internally for them as well.
But I think that so many of our problems are solved by managing people's expectations. So both of you are talking about setting these moments up in advance for people to succeed. And if we just tell them that, so before we send the email, tell them on the end of your call that you're sending them an email, you want them to respond, asking them if we can involve other people and sending the email to other people who should be involved, or here's what typically works at other companies. Not everybody buys our software or our solution every day. How can we set up our buyers for success in buying?
I just thought of a really basic one is send the follow-up email urgently after the call. Set the tone. I've made this mistake loads of times. I get the follow-up out 24 hours, 48 hours later. I actually think that should be a sackable offense.
I always just have a half an hour block before and after every intro call. Because that half an hour beforehand made me make sure I was ready and prepped and brought those names. And the half an hour afterwards meant I could get the recap email right away while I was remembering things and didn't have to go back and listen to the call to remember the exact details. Getting out right away as well, it's velocity in your end, which increases the velocity on their end and their likeliness to reciprocate that urgency. So if you can send it right away afterwards, it's going to be fresh. It's going to be easy for you to do. I'm going to send this to you right afterwards. Can you do me a favor? Let me know if the email looks accurate. Like you said, set expectations, then ask again in the email. Can you let me know if this all looks accurate?
Please respond. I want to talk about our key champion, if you will. And we are building people internally in their organization who we want to then go take this conversation to internal stakeholders. How many stakeholders are involved in your deals on average?
This is just a topic that's changed over the past 10 years or so, since I started in sales, in B2B at least. Everyone's always talking about there's a decision maker. But now that in more complex sales cycles, software, services, solutions, consulting, there's always going to be more than one person who feels like they need to say. Even if there's an economic buyer technically who's going to sign it and be the final check mark, there's often way more people. I think Gartner's latest research, which was in 2021, showed that there are on average 12 stakeholders in a B2B buying decision. And even though you may not see all those people, you're probably engaging with half of those folks. And there's a bunch of people in the background. Now you have to get someone to go and show other people stuff. And that's where you have to really go heavy on champion enablement, which we'll talk about how to do that in a second.
Yeah, maybe it's marketing and events type stuff. The CMO will validate and bless the concept early, for example, but then they'll default to the team on the actual mechanics and decision and choice. And they're very explicit about that. It's actually a really positive trait in an executive that's willing to do that. Obviously, I think deep down they will have the veto power, but often they'll say, hey, I trust my team to make these decisions. Keep me posted. Perfect example for a deal room. And yeah, I think you've got to hedge for that, right? There isn't really, you may think the CMO is your decision maker, but they're going to listen to their team internally before they listen to you.
Yeah, they want to hear from the head of demand gen and the social media person, maybe, who knows? There's always going to be a meeting at some point in a business of a size, probably anywhere, even mum and pop shops, even my business. It's me, my wife, and I've got one employee.
Thank God.
I would want to, yeah, I know, right? HR nightmare. If I was going to make a bigger
making decisions, I'm just happy you have her make decisions.
If I was making a big purchase, I would 100% consult with her.
And she's an accountant, by the way, everyone. She's got accountant.
She's an accountant. She's very logical. I'd 100% consult with her, and I'd probably talk to my employee as well to make sure they were in on it as well. And the reality is the seller, whoever's trying to sell me on this solution, probably won't be on a call with myself, my wife, and my employee. So it comes down to my ability to get them bought in if I believe it's something that we should move forward with. Sometimes our champions aren't as good as selling our solutions and highlighting the need as well as we are, which is why it's so important to make sure you're equipping these people to go and have that conversation in a compelling way to get people who bought in on it when you aren't in the room to do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways that we can enable those champions to go sell on our behalf when they can't re-articulate the same way? Like, they're not trained in our solution or offering our product the same way we are. How can we enable them to go sell internally on our behalf?
I think it starts from that discovery call, that intro call, should we call it? Because a lot can happen more than discovery on that call. But even that recap email, you start to anchor the narrative when you recap their problems, their impacts, and the context of that. Sharing that with people makes it easy for them. So you basically make it easy for them to get people up to speed. Recap always, get new perspectives on those things, but also hedge for the fact that there's probably going to be people who don't get involved in the calls, and do everything you can to share their individual context, but also all the questions that you know they're probably going to have. So when I used to sell to IT buyers, they always want to know about integration, security clearance stuff,
ahead of it,
APIs and all that. If I know 100% they're going to want to ask those questions and I don't have access to them, I'm going to share the documentation ahead of time and say, hey, typically when the IT person gets involved, they want to know, do we have an open API? What is our security registration level? Like, is it SOC 2? Do we have that report? Obviously, you need to get an NDA for some of those things. And you can share that. One way to do that is in attachments on the email, but that's where I would start to default to more of a deal room in that case.
Yeah. It's hard to do this on a discovery call, like to really uncover this. You can, the great ones can. But if you have a good relationship, you've got to really uncover the personal win for whoever you're working with. There has to be something in it for them. The reality is there is a political or a social win for people, whether you explicitly talk about it or not. If you uncover that, they're more likely to get, I don't want to say the word compliance, but it sounds a bit too much, but like you're more likely to get collaboration on that enablement and on that selling internally for you.
They're as bought in on getting the deal done as you are.
Yes.
That's always a good feeling. And because of that, you know they're going to go to bat for you. And you just want to make sure that you make that easy for them by giving them everything they know. So if they get asked a question, they have the answers available to them. But if they're not as good at selling internally, then you don't forgo your control over that, because chances are whoever you're selling to probably isn't as good at communicating their own pains, because they might be embarrassed about the fact that some of their business isn't doing as well as it could be. But if you recap that, then it's you who's kind of said that's the problem, and it doesn't mean they have to go, I've messed up and that's why we need to buy this.
That's actually, I didn't even think about that. If you're the person that implemented the broken process solution, whatever, there has to be some moment where you confront that and confront the awkwardness of it and help them own it. I just thought of a really good story. It's English related. So when I was a floundering AE with a job I should have never had when I was very young, we sold to Tesco, which is basically Walmart in England. And the guy we were working with was really young. And my VP of sales, incredible VP of sales, was very cautious about this guy because he was young. And he's doing IT service management at a place like Tesco's. It's very serious stuff. We're outside, actually. We'd had a dinner, whatever. We were outside smoking a cigarette. I asked him, hey, what does this mean for you? My VP of sales had teed me up to ask this question. And he said, I want to be the youngest director in Tesco history. And the moment he said that, I was like, okay. And he asked me back and I said, I'm basically failing at this job. I need this deal to keep my job and show that I can actually do this. So I was young in my role too. The deal did close. And I think he did become the youngest director in Tesco history. That's why the higher ups gave him lots of freedom and respect, because he was charging his way through the business and that's what he wanted to do.
And you didn't get fired, right?
I did.
Oh,
Funny story. I actually made President's Club that year from a blow-in deal, completely blow-in deal. And the Tesco deal, I did a tiny bit of work for, like tiny. And I made President's Club and I got fired about 3 months later because
But you took the trip.
Yeah. And that's actually, I took now my wife, my then girlfriend. Yep. Tahiti.
how?
It's a lot of commitment for a third day. I had a mentor who always called this, like with a stakeholder, like we're sitting at the table having dinner together. How do you get them to come sit in the booth next to you? And now you're selling alongside each other. They're part of your team. And I thought that's such a beautiful visualization to think about. Are there certain questions that you ask to make sure that they're prepared to do that, or certain ways that you tee yourself up for that?
Well, make sure you're wearing deodorant.
Sit on the same side. Yeah. You don't want to smell. Sure.
I would say, you know, common things that have probably killed your deals in the past. And again, you know, the questions that people typically ask and the reasons why people don't buy from you. So if you've got someone who's really bought in as a champion, you can test that in multiple ways. But if you feel like you've got someone who's going to be a champion and they say, I'm going to go have a chat with the team, when's that going to happen? When's your next standing meeting? How are you going to communicate that? Help them plan it out almost. Like work with them to plan that. And then also think of the top 2 to 3 objections they might get from each person. Say, what are you going to say if this person says this? Or what if that person feels this way about that?
Yeah.
You know, is there anyone who you think is going to be opposed to this? And already kind of get in their mind what they're going to do if something goes on, because you just can't control that conversation because you're not there and you're not going to get invited to it most of the time. But what you can do is prepare that person to be almost as good as you in that conversation if you were there.
You have to give people a consultation period. Stakeholders that are involved, if you surprise them late with, hey, a big change, they're going to be more against that change than if you involve them early and consult them rather than tell them that this is the change that's going to. And there's people like this in every company that don't get considered, and it's a big impact to their job. A good rep will sniff that out and make sure it's delivered in the correct way instead of after the fact.
We only have a couple minutes left here. And in the question and answer, anonymous attendee asks, what do you mean by deal room in this context? And I want to just really quick, like from your perspective, what are the things that you include in a deal room? What you think has to go in there?
I'm always going to include a mutual action plan or some form of timeline. Anchor on their timeline, what I've learned in the discovery call. Hey, we want to get this in this place because of this. And then I'm going to work backwards to map out the steps that need to happen to get them there. It's going to be like 5 steps with dates attached and actions that's going to happen. I'm also going to include all those FAQs, the documentation that they're probably going to ask for, but if I put them there to start with, they don't need them. But the mutual action plan is definitely one. What's happened, recaps, documentation. I basically want it so that if they were to share this with their boss who hasn't been involved in the conversation, they could read it and be completely up to speed immediately on the what, the when, the why, which again is the problem, what we're going to do to try and fix it, and the when is this going to happen, how is it going to happen, and so they've got no questions. I'm going to give a quote here, and I said quick, but I saw, I'm going to mention KD again. Now he's a celebrity here. He's in Austin as well. We should have had him in. But KD once said the proposal, and in this sense, I would say a deal room beats proposal, isn't for the person you've been selling to. It's for everyone else. It's to basically give them an internal demo to win everyone else over. It's not for the people who've been involved in your deal. It's for all the other people who just want to have a say. And if you've got all the answers there, you're going to have less problems, less chance of just being shut down at the final step, but also get them in, get them on board.
I have nothing to add.
Yeah, beautifully.